All right, welcome to the Hope Dealers Podcast, Season 2 video debut for those of you watching. Thank you so much, and for those of you listening, thank you again for tuning in. We're so excited to be here today. We've got a wonderful guest here with us, my good friend, Ari Patchen. How are you, sir?
I am doing incredibly well. Thank you so much. I am learning the proper podcast etiquette in this very moment.
Yeah.
And I am super excited.
Well, we're happy to have you here, man. You had a busy day so far?
Busy bee.
Yeah.
Fridays are always crunch time in my position.
Yeah. Which is what?
Oh, yeah. Great question.
Yeah.
So currently I work as the Community Outreach Coordinator for Hope is Alive Ministries in Oklahoma City.
Gotcha. So you're based out of here in the central office?
Specifically, yes.
Gotcha. And you've been working here for how long?
2 years.
2 years.
February 1st.
Wow.
It's been a long 2 years, but it's gone very quickly.
What a fun 2 years.
Oh, it's so much fun.
Yeah.
So much fun.
I mean, but as somebody who's a recovering drug addict and alcoholic, I mean, when's the last time you kept a job for 2 years?
I've had probably, no exaggeration, 50 jobs.
Really?
Which is not something I'm proud of, but it's just a reality of
Just a fact.
what my life looked like in addiction. I've probably had that many phone numbers too. So.
Okay. I remember us talking about that one night on the way home from our AA home group.
Right.
And I forget who was with us. It was you, me. It was Grant, who said he's had the same.
I know, I was blown away.
Yeah, he's had the same phone number since what, like middle school or something?
Right. That's just outrageous to me.
Yeah.
As long as I've had this job, I've had the same phone number. So I'm super proud of both of those things.
There you go. Yeah, I've had the same phone number going on in, I guess, 5 years now. That's the longest I've kept one in ever. I don't think my parents' home phone when I was a kid counts.
Right.
Yeah. So you're a community outreach coordinator here in Oklahoma City. Can you tell our listeners and viewers kind of what that means?
Yeah, so Hope is Alive, specifically what my job entails is donor relationships.
Okay.
Fundraising, getting people to know what Hope is Alive is in the community. So the program that we provide, sponsorships to the events.
Yeah.
Working with volunteers, resources. I just had lunch with a legal group that wants to come in and provide free legal services to our residents.
Okay.
Providing speakers, meals, Sunday nights, connecting with local churches.
So a lot of interaction with people in general.
Oh, man, every day. It's amazing. I never thought in my wildest dreams,
Didn't always see yourself as a people person?
I always like to be around people, but I always have kind of like to be on the back end behind the scenes. And so that's not the case today.
Right.
I get to make, dozens of phone calls a day and texts and really be the spokesman for Hope is Alive in Oklahoma City. And so I'm incredibly honored for that.
That's awesome, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah. You always do seem busy. To do these podcasts, we have to schedule it, obviously, with anybody who's on here. It's very rare that you're going to ever find somebody on our team that is close to 60 people deep that can just do it on a whim. I think this is the third time. This was the third invite Ari had to the podcast.
This is true, and I'm just honored that you fit me in today.
We're happy to have you here.
Absolutely. I think part of that is I'm making up for a lot of lost time.
Sure.
And so the mission is critical.
Time is short
and lives are on the line.
Yep.
So we got to get after it.
Absolutely. And so you've been doing the community outreach, thing for a while, but you also, when you started, you did a lot of events.
Correct.
And you and I worked side by side quite a bit.
Fun times.
A
Yes.
lot of traveling.
A lot of traveling. It was great.
Yeah. The North Carolina trip was one for the ages.
I will never forget that as long as I live.
That was, I think I've probably brought that up on this podcast, like, I don't know, at least 6 times. And because anytime I have, whether it's like somebody who might have something to do with our market there or somebody who's from there, I'm like, yeah, I've been there.
Yeah.
That was, but that trip was just, sometimes, didn't feel like a work trip.
Yeah, absolutely. cool how we got to stay on the beach.
Yeah.
A beautiful home. We got paid to do that.
Yeah.
We'll also, getting to engage with the local community and
Absolutely.
host an event and
Yeah, 2 events.
2 events. Yeah.
And not to mention the one thing about that trip that always sticks with me, and I thought about when we were at your birthday a couple weeks ago, is
That was a fun time too.
yeah, that was a great time.
Fishbowl.
Fishbowl, gotta play fishbowl.
Don't ever play with Trevor Mathis though.
No,
yeah.
no,
I'm
little
just
little
kidding, Trevor.
little too loud. We love you, Trevor, but no, no, but Jamie, one of our Southside residents, was at your birthday.
Oh yeah, what a cool story. So
And we met him in North Carolina at
Correct.
an event, but
Yeah.
he was still hurting badly when we met him out there.
absolutely.
Now he's here in Oklahoma City, just killing it.
Yep.
I mean, those
Yeah.
are-
So one of the, if I may,
Yeah.
one of the cool things about Hope is Alive is the reach that we have.
yeah,
And so for a partnership to extend, that many states over, and for the community to want what Hope is Alive has, and for them to see the value in sending their people, back across from 4 or 5 states, is why Jamie's life is doing so well.
absolutely.
So he had to get out of North Carolina,
yeah,
and we had an opening in Oklahoma City, and I have the incredible honor of actually being Jamie's AA sponsor.
That's
and
awesome.
So getting to walk with him, almost every day through the many things that life is producing for him.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned, Jamie had to get out of North Carolina. That's the case for a lot of people in Hope is Alive. Is we might have a house or a market, where they're from, but it's not where they need to be.
Right.
I had a lot of friends because I'm from Dallas, and when we opened the Dallas house, even though it was 3 years after I arrived at Hope is Alive, and I'd already graduated by that point, but I had a lot of friends asking, "Oh dang man, don't you wish they would have opened that Dallas house when you were first coming in?" And I was like, "No,
Right.
I did not need to be there."
Right.
It's a tough pill for some people to swallow, though.
Absolutely.
Even if it's just an hour and a half down the road, like, hey, you're from Oklahoma City, man. Why don't you try Tulsa? Or why don't you take it a step further and go to Wichita?
Right.
But the coolest thing for me, I think, that I see is a lot of these people that do that have the willingness to make that jump, take that step and go outside of their comfort zone and, go to a different, whether it's a city, state, whatever, is whenever they make a home out of it. And when their residency is over,
Right.
they decide to stay.
Right.
And that's just one of the many miracles that we
Yeah, I mean, I think, if you aren't a person in recovery, then this may not resonate with you. But, the one thing that I've always loved about people in recovery is that we're community minded.
Right.
And so when you can surrender to recovery, and the community that you're placed in,
Yeah.
then it's a great way to start over,
Absolutely.
in a home.
Yeah.
With a community of guys that are like-minded and striving for the same goal.
Yeah. They get it.
Right.
They either are where you're at, they've been where you're at, but you're all striving towards the same goal, no matter what your background is.
Correct.
That was one of the craziest things for myself and for a lot of residents, I think, is before you come into something like this, sometimes the case is you're hurting so bad, but you hear people telling you, "Well, I get it, man, I get it," and you're like, "But you don't get it."
Right.
Whether it's family, friends, whoever. Then you show up here and they say, "I get it," and you have to take a step back and, oh my gosh, they really do get it.
Right.
It's a pretty wild thing.
It is.
But you're not from Oklahoma City.
Not originally, no.
Okay, where are you originally from?
Yeah, so I was born small town Kansas,
Kansas.
but moved pretty quickly to New Jersey.
Jersey.
Yeah, Jersey Shore, South Jersey,
Yes.
Calumet County.
Okay.
Exit 0 on the Garden State Parkway.
Still got that memorized.
Oh, yeah.
Love it.
I loved growing up on the East Coast.
Yeah.
I can just remember, our first house was a block away from the beach.
Wow.
And so as early as 10, 11, 12, surfing every day and joining surf club and competing and, that was my life. I love that aspect of the East Coast is the ocean.
For sure. And I know we've talked about this a few times, but being an East Coast guy, are you a New Jersey Devils fan? Or
I'm not a Devils fan.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I stick close to my roots, which my father embedded in me, and that's the Rangers.
Yeah.
I've actually gotten to see Gretzky.
Wow.
Madison Square Garden hat trick, where had the honor of actually taking my dad's hat and throwing it on the rink, and
that's awesome.
It was a cool moment. Yeah.
My dad's also from New York, and
right.
But me growing up in Dallas Stars are my number one. New York Rangers are my number two. They play in different conferences. Mm-hmm. The only time they're going to meet up in the postseason is if they both got to the finals. So
right.
Generally, it gives me someone to root for all year long, no matter what. But what's funny is a lot of my friends will think because I'm from Dallas that I'm a Cowboys fan.
Sure.
When I was a kid, I'll never forget, I was probably in first or second grade. My dad went and, we were getting new school clothes. My dad bought me this New York Giants jacket.
Mm-hmm.
I was like 7.
I've had one of those, yeah.
And I said, but I asked, I was like, wait, is this the right team? And he said, listen. He said, we do live in Dallas, You want to root for the Stars? Go ahead. You want to root for the Texas Rangers? Go ahead. You want to root for the Mavericks? I don't care. You're not rooting for the Cowboys.
It's a good man there.
Yeah. And it's so funny how I just bring that up because you said that your dad embedded that in you. And it's like, to this day, I've tried over the years, because I'm from Dallas.
Sure.
It
makes sense, yeah.
I've been to New York on vacation a few times to go see his family, but I'm not from New York.
Yeah.
I've tried so many times to get into the Dallas Cowboys, and every time I watch, I'm just like, no.
Yeah.
It's so crazy.
Yeah, I mean, my dad was born and raised New York, upstate, and then, eventually his family moved to New York City, where they had a corner store.
Wow.
Back in the 40s and 50s.
Okay.
And so my dad is Jewish.
Okay.
And so very Orthodox Jewish neighborhood back in the, the 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
And, he's got lots of stories of people he's run into down there. And
I'm sure he does. I would love to sit down and hear some of those stories sometime.
Yeah. Another time.
Yeah, another time. That's for another podcast one of these days. How much sobriety do you have, Ari?
Yeah, so 34 months.
34 months.
Yeah, March 4th, I will have 3 years.
That's awesome.
And I love that I get to remember that date because it is one of the only dates on the calendar that is an actual command.
Really?
March 4th.
Yeah.
Anyways,
That's awesome.
I am
Congratulations.
very proud of that time. I'm only promised today.
Sure.
But for the first time in my life, from the point of the first substance coming into my body at 12 years old.
Yeah.
I can proudly say that I no longer feel like I'll ever put something in my body to change the way I feel.
I love that.
Yeah, and it was a long time coming for me.
Yeah. On that note, how long did you spend in your addiction?
Right. And so, I think my addiction started well before I actually put anything physically into my body. But, for the chemical addiction, it started, it's kind of fuzzy, but between 12 to 14.
Okay.
My first stint with alcohol, per se, was at 14.
Okay.
Where I actually overdosed. My blood alcohol was 0.387.
Wow.
Alcoholic coma for 2 days in the hospital. Had no recollection of any of that.
Yeah.
Except I was trying to avoid pain.
Wow.
And I had learned early on that if I wanted to do that, then drinking could take that from me.
It's a very common theme for a lot of us who are alcoholics. It just takes away the pain.
Right.
Makes you feel better.
Coping mechanism.
Absolutely. I was talking to Robert about this on a few episodes ago. I'll never forget when I had this friend who I was out drinking with one night, and he had been told, we were on our way to the bar, and he had been told by his, buddy / roommate / landlord, like, hey man, this month you can't be late on bills. Can't do it. $500 on the first, gotta have it.
Right.
And we're sitting there taking shots. And I wasn't going to say anything because it wasn't my business. And he looked at me and he goes, I love this. And I said, what? He goes, liquor and the feeling of just not caring.
Right.
And I said, how are you going to pay those bills though?
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
But right now I don't care.
Yeah.
And we ended up but we all ended up taking that to such a large extreme.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I think what happened for me in that moment when I was 14 is when I came to in that hospital, and I can still remember pulling the catheter out. Don't recommend doing that.
Yeah.
And you know, I absolutely love my parents. I'm not here to place blame on my parents at all. But looking back, there was not, as I remember it, there were no real consequences.
Right. It was just something that happened.
They were just glad I was alive. And so my consequence was I had to go to work. I had started that next day as I came out of the hospital, actually that evening, I was supposed to start my first job ever. And
at 14?
So, yep.
And doing what?
I was a busboy.
Oh, okay.
Little push here. Henry's on the beach. I don't even know if it's still around, but
Henry's on the beach.
Yeah,
Busboy.
Cape May, New Jersey.
Okay.
Busboy, and I had to go in that night, and the worst hangover you could ever imagine.
So it's like straight out of the hospital into this?
Oh, you know, it may have been a few hours, but yeah.
So
yeah.
yes.
But that was my consequence.
Okay.
You know, and work for my parents. You know, both my parents were master's degree educated, very intellectual, and both very hard workers. And so in my house, you know, learned very early on, you know, that you work to get what you want.
Yeah.
And so I absolutely love them for that. I still think that's something that I cling to.
Yeah.
It can become damaging for some people, you know, and workaholism.
Yeah.
Which I've dealt with very intentionally
for sure
in the last 3 years. But yeah, so 14, you know, that was my consequence, and so going to work, and so the very next weekend, can you guess what I was doing?
Drinking.
Yeah. You know, and so that created a habit for me.
Sure.
A mindset of, you know, I've got to come up with the money, so I've got to work, but then I'm going to lie to my parents about what I'm doing because they didn't want me to be drinking. And,
sure.
Never understanding fully what was happening inside me.
Yeah.
You know, I was detaching.
And so at a very young age, you're already just building this up in your head that this is what you're good at. This is just kind of what's normal.
Normal and a solution to the inability to process my emotions. Anything outside of Ari's control.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like I had a proper outlet to be able to process that.
Right.
And alcohol became that outlet for me.
And so this continues on through high school, through...
Yeah, absolutely. So 14, this may not make sense to some people, but I think the very first time I drank alcohol, I was alcoholic.
Right.
And so I had all the tendencies already, you know, starting from trauma at 5 years old, inability to process things, very selfish, self-centered person, trying in every possible way I could to escape, not deal with life, fear, conflict, lots of emotional abuse in my household.
Okay.
So wanting to escape all that, alcohol was just the go-to. Just
a continual escape for you.
Continuous. So 14, alcohol began. I'm working full time. I have a lot more freedom than I did. Where I grew up, South Jersey, it's a tourist trap.
Yeah.
They call it shoobies. So a shoobie on the Jersey Shore is vacationers who come with knee-high socks and Velcro sandals, and they'll come walk on the beach in their Speedos. And anyways.
Somebody called me a shoobie when we were in North Carolina. Not for that reason.
Right.
I think I was wearing a hoodie of the name of the island we were on.
There, you're shoobie. Yeah.
That's okay. That's okay. But that's why I laughed at shoobie. So
right.
Sorry, go ahead.
So I started. I lived in this area where it's summertime. There's 200,000 to 400,000 people. In the wintertime, there's 30,000 locals.
Right.
And so it's a place to, as a child, it was safe.
Yeah.
So I could, ride my bike with my friends everywhere, stay out past dark. And when addiction entered in the picture, it was just the perfect way for me to continue that type of lifestyle.
I see.
And so marijuana entered at 14, very much the gateway drug for me.
Yeah.
To start hanging out with the wrong people. And so I'm a horrible criminal. It's God's mercy, really, because I get caught at almost everything that I do every single time.
By the law.
Oh, by the law, by my parents, by adults, by, healthy people.
Yeah.
And so I quit high school sophomore year. I failed.
Okay.
I did absolutely zero homework. And so, yeah, that's not a good look for the principal and the teachers. And so I went to a private Christian high school because I had gotten in so much, I won't even say major problems. I was just a class clown.
Right.
And so lots of detentions in public school, staying after, nothing huge.
Yeah.
Just my mom wanted me to go somewhere maybe with more focus on education and not so much of my friends.
Absolutely.
And so that was kind of hard for me to make that transition from all the kids I'd kind of grown up with in elementary and middle school.
Yeah.
To go to a new school. And I fit in pretty quickly, but I also, I'd begun to drink. So I would actually bring alcohol at 14, 15 to school.
Wow.
Hide in my locker. Never understanding what was happening, began smoking weed. So sophomore year, I quit, got my GED. Thought I was hot stuff.
Yeah.
16, I'm graduated high school. And I actually started community college. And just wasn't a good fit for me.
Right.
I found too much enjoyment in surfing.
Sure.
And by this time, I had actually become like a small-scale drug dealer of marijuana.
Yeah.
And I had been abusing Adderall for a long time at that point as well. So that's kind of what, by 17, my life was just radically out of control.
Right.
I was drinking every day, smoking marijuana every day, doing Adderall as much as possible, staying out all night. Just
anything to mask the fact that your life definitely is not going how you may have mapped out when you were a kid.
Absolutely. You know, I had never in my wildest dreams thought that at 17, I'd be waking up in a pile of my own urine, throw up, in an abandoned house. I had no idea how I got there.
Right. It's crazy. That tends to be a very common theme for a lot of us who get started. I got started at 14. A lot of people like yourself have as well. And, really what happens is our life just doesn't turn out the way we want.
Right.
And instead of acknowledging that and making a change to better our life, we instead just keep barreling down the same path. We just double down. That was something I was talking to Amy about over the holidays, was kind of like, when I would go to a family gathering, and I was known as the lush of the group for always being the obnoxious drunk guy. So at the next family gathering, I would just double down and drink more.
Right.
Because I didn't want to feel embarrassed. So if I would just drink more, that would mask that feeling.
Absolutely.
And to the outside, like you said, to the outside person, a lot of this is like, what?
Right.
Just stop.
Yeah.
But we can't just stop. It doesn't really work like that, does it?
I wish it did.
Right.
And there are those select few that, whether it's a spiritual awakening, or they just have that willpower.
Sure.
Where, they're tired of waking up in their own vomit.
Yeah.
And they can quit. But, for the majority of us, that are using those substances to cope, to mask, the desire will never be enough.
Right.
The marriage will never be enough. The kids, the jobs, the security.
Not if we don't want it.
Nope.
None of that matters.
It's surrender.
Right.
It's surrender.
And so moving along through your 20s, I know you said you're a horrible criminal and
right,
plenty of run-ins with the law, but kind of walk us through that a little bit and kind of what brings you to that place of a rock bottom?
Okay. Yeah. So, 18, get 3 quick felonies, faced with,
Just 3 quick ones.
yeah, really they're right in a row,
Yeah.
the same thing. So I'm going to just tell you this story real quick.
Yeah.
We were getting ready as a family to move to Israel when I was 18.
Mm-hmm.
I was all for it. Drinking age was 18.
That's why you're all for it.
Right.
Not because of the idea of getting to go live in Israel,
Right.
which sounds incredible.
I know. It was drinking age was 18, and being an 18-year-old man, the women were beautiful, and I wanted to go live there because of that. And
Sex,
so,
drugs, and rock and roll.
hey, all day long.
Okay.
2 days before we were leaving, my parents had, quit their jobs, sold the house, the cars. We had an estate sale where there's these strange people in our house just taking everything. I invited myself to a party that was happening in a hotel room and deemed it my going away party. And long story short, woke up again like I tend to do when I drink.
Yeah.
Came to 2 days later in a jail cell. And
You woke up 2 days later in a jail cell.
And had somehow climbed into a 3rd-story outside balcony hotel room and saw fit to try to steal those vacationers' clothes, and was caught running down the hall with clothes on. It was just ridiculous. Who knows what I was thinking?
Yeah.
But it just so happened that family was an off-duty, on vacation New York City police detective.
No.
And so, I hit the jackpot there. And
You woke up and you were trying to steal his clothes for some reason.
his long socks and sandals and who knows what else. And so that phone call with my mom, I can't imagine what that must have felt like for her to hear her son, who's supposed to be moving with her, that she's getting out of that lifestyle, is now in jail for the first time.
So this is the first time you're in jail.
First time I was in jail.
Okay.
And so, fast forward, 20 years old, I am now in and out of jail multiple times. They know me by name. I have already had 2 DUIs.
Yeah.
And 18, I had 2 DUIs.
Jeez.
Tons of underage drinkings by that point. And I had to relocate. I had to get out of there. I was homeless. I was living on the beach, couch to couch.
So your family's in Israel.
They had been in Israel, and then
left.
they actually had come back because of other circumstances to move to Wichita, Kansas.
Okay.
And so back to my roots in Wichita, where my mom grew up.
Yeah.
And so I eventually followed, was on probation, 10 years. It was either 10 years in prison or 10 years on probation. So I chose the probation.
As most would.
Yes. And so fast forward that time, I wanted something differently. I had begun to do what we call embalming fluid, wet, angel dust, all kinds of ecstasy, heroin. I didn't do meth, cocaine. I mean, I was
Anything you could get your hands
seeking
on.
anything I could get my hands on to fill this emptiness inside me.
I mean, yeah, so you're at a point where, like you said, you were an alcoholic as soon as you started drinking, started smoking some pot, started doing some Adderall, all this stuff. But if we stay at this long enough, by the end of it, we're not alcoholics. We are, but we're not, and it's not like our drug of choice is alcohol or our drug of choice is this. No, we just love substance,
Right.
just in general. Mm-hmm. And that's a pretty frightening feeling.
Absolutely.
Because it's just anything you can get your hands on.
Absolutely.
And now you're grabbing stuff that could kill you.
Right. And so going back to that 14-year-old Ari, who there's no consequences for my actions. 10 years in prison isn't enough for me to stop, because I need that substance to mask myself off,
Right.
to make you like me, because
Right.
I don't like myself. And so I 20 years old, I move in with my parents in Wichita. I had received the Lord Jesus into my heart at a young age, but I didn't really understand what that meant.
Yeah.
And so at 21, that became something I embraced and threw myself in with a church family. And, for years, my life was For a few years, I was as clean as a whistle. I was healthy and I was happy. And a moment came where this woman came into my life who wasn't healthy. And I was very much attracted to her. And so, she was a partier. And I didn't really understand that I was an alcoholic and that when I put the substance into my body, I can't stop until I break everything, destroy everything. And
burn it all down.
It was just within a few months where the healthy Ari went.
All those years of work is just gone within a few months.
Right.
And I want our viewers and listeners to hear that that's how fast it can happen. And we've heard this a lot on here on the show. I talk to people all the time who haven't gotten sober yet, and they'll say stuff like, well, I just want to get to a point where I can go have a glass of wine on the weekend. And do you know what I say to those people? If you find that secret, please let me know about it.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't exist.
Right.
Not for us.
Not for the real alcoholics.
No.
Yeah.
One's not enough.
Yeah.
Like you said, till we burn it all down.
Right. And my personal story is different for everybody.
Sure.
But if I put any ounce of alcohol into my body, it may not be at that moment. I may get away with that one beer for that night.
Yeah.
But I'm going to create a mindset of, hey, I got away with it.
Right.
I can do that again tomorrow or the next week. And I am a speed freak. And so I need meth or cocaine or crack or whatever it is.
And so basically what you're doing as, talking this out for us is you're playing the tape out.
Right.
Which is something that is very important.
Yep.
For those of us in recovery is to play the tape. Because like you said, maybe it's not that one drink that's going to take you out that night.
Right.
You might be able to keep it at that one drink. But then it turns into 2 drinks to let's go get some of this, to this sounds good too.
Right.
And like where we're at in your story right now, it just takes a few months, sometimes quicker.
Right. And for me, and the continuation of this story is that within those, very quickly, in that time, I found cocaine again, and I had really didn't want that to happen.
Right.
And it became everything to me, to where I was spending entire paychecks.
Yeah.
$500-600 a week on this addiction. And then that's where it becomes very dangerous, because you're stealing, you're lying, you're conniving, you're being malicious just to feed this substance. You become completely in bondage.
Yeah, just feeding a habit.
Right. And so, playing the tape forward in my story, I met a beautiful young lady.
Yeah.
We had sex one time, had a baby. Yep. Both of us very young, very naive. We got married, started a family, but she had no idea what she was getting into.
Right.
I was this closet alcoholic, drug addict. And so we had some years, 10 years of marriage on paper. Half of that, separated because of my addiction.
Yeah.
And so I have always, even from the beginning, it seems like I've just wanted to get right.
Yeah.
I hated my addiction.
Yeah.
Because it was, when it stopped being fun, it was just bondage.
Right.
And so we had 3 beautiful kids. Today they're 15, 13, and 10 years old. And in the midst of all that, they saw their dad dealing with his addiction and recovery. So, I was able to piece together, 18 months, 6 months, kind of just what they call in recovery white knuckling.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm just using my will to say I'm not gonna do it right now.
Right. Not today.
Not today.
But it's all that's on your mind, and I hate to cut
100%.
you off, but and this kind of goes back to when we try to go have that one drink. Like, I was talking to my dad about this a couple months ago. Like, yeah, sure. Maybe for 6 months even, let's pretend for 6 months, I can go out and drink normally. 2 drinks per visit or whatever, per outing. That is all that would be on my mind, is the fact that I kept it to 2 drinks.
Right.
You know, it's not like normal people who go out and they have they go to happy hour with some friends and they have a glass of wine and they might have a second and then they leave, they go home and they start thinking about the next day, what they have to get done for work and their responsibilities. All that would be on my mind is like, I stopped at 2.
Right.
And I stopped at 2.
You know, it brings up a good point. So I've been to treatment facilities, recovery centers, sober livings, I don't know, 12 different treatment centers.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, you know, I really thought they would work.
Right.
You know, and towards the end, you know, just to get a safe place to stay and, you know, get people off your back, you know, it's the strangest illness that exists is alcoholism. Mm-hmm. But, you know, it could be years in between and it's all you think about.
Yeah.
And so I could go to treatment and know the exact moment I get out, I'm getting high.
Right.
And, you know, it's a scary thing to go through.
It is.
It's really hard, almost impossible, I'd say, to be able to do on your own to get through that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if it was easy, that's what everybody would do.
Yeah.
Like you said, white knuckling. And so you said on paper you're married 10 years, but half of that separated because, you know, your 3 kids are watching their dad go in and out of his addiction.
Right.
What's the turning point?
Man, I'm a dry drunk, you know, and so I start really well, you know, never finishing really anything. You know, not education. As I mentioned in the beginning, you know, 50 jobs.
50 jobs, yeah.
You know, I mean, prior to Hope is Alive, the longest staying job I have is about 2.5 years.
Right.
And so the turning point, so I had 4.5 years of sobriety. Had white knuckled, had begun the AA support group program.
Yeah.
Only completed about halfway.
Yeah.
You know, got to, you know, step 9 and didn't work a real program. Didn't get a sponsor. Didn't go to meetings. Didn't sponsor other men.
Didn't work it.
Oh, absolutely not. I thought that AA was in the 1-hour meeting, and it's actually a way of life.
Right.
And most of AA happens outside of that 1-hour meeting.
Yeah, the meeting, you know, and this is just my opinion. For me, the meeting is just a good reminder. Yeah. And after a while, a chance to see some friends.
Yeah.
And it's kind of something that you need at the end of a long day. Mm-hmm. A big part of the reason that we go on Mondays.
Yeah.
You and I, anyways.
Yeah.
It's the beginning of a new week. It's a good reminder for the week. It's good to hear some other people share. But yeah, you got to take it out of the room.
Right.
What's the thing we say at the end of every meeting? It works if you
work it.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's good.
If you don't work it, it's probably not going to work.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of cliche, but you know those tend to be the best reminders.
I remember early on in my recovery, this time around at least, going to a bunch of AA meetings and hearing people get up there to get their chip, whether it was a month or a year, 10 years. And a recurring theme I kept hearing was like, I worked the steps.
Yeah.
You've got to work the steps. And I don't know if it was the theatrical side of me sitting there just like, what a lame speech. Like, come on. You got to have something better than that. But after a while, when I actually did start working a program of Alcoholics Anonymous and working those steps, that's all I really had to say.
Yeah.
Work the steps.
Absolutely.
There's a reason that every single person says that, because that's how it works for you.
You know, the way I understand it is it's a program.
Yes.
And as part of that program, to get to the success of the program is the steps.
Yes.
You know, and within that, you get a relationship with God.
Absolutely.
And other people.
Absolutely. So we rabbit trailed for a minute.
Yeah.
What brings you
turning point?
Yeah,
right?
turning point to Hope is Alive.
Yeah, absolutely. So 4.5 years of clean time. I fail. I go back out. Real bad this time. You know, I had to drugs or family now, and I chose drugs.
Yeah.
And I had a relationship with God. And so I had to go extra hard, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
to eliminate feeling God, anything for God and anything for my family. And so that led me to, becoming an IV user, which had never been anything I thought I would become, and becoming homeless and becoming a person who will do anything under the sun as a homeless person to continue to use, because when I'm using, I'm not feeling.
Right.
And when I'm not feeling, I don't love God, and I don't love myself, and I don't love my children.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to ask. This whole story of yours, just like many of ours, started off with, masking
Right.
the feelings.
Right.
Right. Or lack thereof. And now you're at a point where you have a family.
Yep.
3 kids.
Yep.
Lovely wife.
Yep.
You've got a relationship with God.
Right.
Because you've been trying this recovery thing.
Mm-hmm.
And now you've got to double down.
Yep.
On the substance to get rid of all this feeling.
Right. And, there's no excuse for my actions.
Right.
Absolutely none. But that's just the reality.
Sure.
And so there I was faced with family, no longer having the patience to deal with this individual who now is relapsed.
Again.
And again, the little black writing underneath is, 20 plus times. And so now, as part of the turning point story, I'm beginning to not think I'm able to get sober, and that was something new for me, because
maybe
I'd
this is how it ends.
This is I won't actually physically commit suicide, but if death happens, I'm open to it. And so, knowing that, I had a family member who just never gave up. Well, one being my mother, my dad, but they're in Israel, and so it's hard for them to physically help. The other being my Uncle Mikey.
Uncle Mike.
Yeah, and so I was homeless in the streets of Wichita, Kansas. There's a street there. It's called South Broadway.
Yep.
And it's like a war zone.
Yeah.
It's just a breeding ground for IV use, homelessness, and really bad things.
Yeah.
And so there I was, in the midst of this, what we called the jungle, the pit of South Broadway. And my Uncle Mike never gave up. And so he would bail me out. And in the course of 3 months, I was in and out of sober living after sober living, trying to get it right. And eventually I just stopped making contact with him. And so he heard about Hope is Alive, praise the Lord, from a church partnership that they had, where a few guys came and shared their story, their testimony on stage.
So hold on real quick.
Okay.
He heard about this through a church partnership.
Right.
Isn't that kind of funny? What you currently do for Hope is Alive is how he heard about it.
I think that's why, going back to the beginning and not boasting, but that's why I value so much what I do. And I
You're
want to
living in your calling, my friend.
So busy, because God had mercy on me.
And is allowing you to live in your calling.
And is allowing me to live out my calling. Absolutely.
Man, that is so good. But Mike hears about Hope is Alive?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you come.
Yeah, he hears about it, and it's a few months.
Yeah.
And what's cool about what Hope is Alive provides is they have a place, a tangible place for individuals who have maybe nephews like I was, or a son or a daughter, or a parent, or whatever it is, who's still out in active addiction, where that family member can come and volunteer in a home, get engaged in the lives of the residents. And that's what my uncle did. He came to the men's home, started participating in the Bible studies, hanging out with the guys long before I ever even entered the Hope is Alive program.
Yeah.
And so, as you had mentioned, geographic change is needed.
Yep.
I was doing drugs in the neighborhood that the Hope is Alive home was in.
The Wichita men's home.
The Wichita men's home.
Gotcha.
And so it was not, I knew I couldn't stay sober, and I didn't want to fail this time.
Yeah.
And I knew my kids, while I had been distant, they were still there, and they were living in Norman, Oklahoma at the time. And I knew if I was going to do this finally, that I needed to be in a place where hopefully one day, I could visit them easily. And so Cool thing about Hope is Alive today is that we have, 25 homes in 6 states, 11 cities. And so there was a bed open.
Come on.
Yeah. So I filled out my application. The recruiter called almost instantly. The next day I was talking to, one of my best friends today, Grant Green.
Yeah.
And his first question, he's like, you're willing not to date, right? I was like, yeah, that's not a problem right now.
Yeah.
And I love him to death for that. But so I entered the program. My sobriety date's March 4th. I detoxed myself off of meth alone in a best buddy on earth's house. I knew I'd done it many times, and so what I needed was a safe place to sleep and some food to eat when I would come to.
Yeah.
And so I did that for 6 days, and Mike picked me up, drove me to Oklahoma City, dropped me off HQ headquarters.
HQ.
Yeah, house number 1 in Hope is Alive, Quail Creek.
Oh.
I'd lived in Oklahoma City multiple times in addiction, but never on the north side. So it was like a brand new start for me.
Yeah.
And it's where life began, man. It wasn't instantly. I mean, I came to Hope is Alive with a pair of shoes, a couple socks, a pair of pants, a couple shirts, and just the desire not to use.
Yeah.
I had no ID, no phone, no money. My mom paid rent for the first 2 months.
Yeah.
Uncle Mike kept a receipt. He still has it. He gave it to me. He purchased me a month's worth of food, and I had to pay him back.
Yes.
I love him to death for that.
You'll be paying me back for this.
Right. A lot of cereal and milk and
yeah. I remember when you first showed up. I mean, and there was something different about you.
I love that.
But it was weird. Like, definitely you were different. I mean, you had the bleach blonde hair, right. And you were, you were really tan, and you had this kind of goofy way about you. But I will tell you, and I'm not the only person to say this, Ari has this thing where you kind of meet him and you're like, I want to be friends with this guy.
Love it.
Not really sure why, but yeah.
I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I'd done the sober living route before, and I saw through what I thought the Hope is Alive program was, and I share that with the founders today, you know, that, it's just one more program, it's just one more entity that's just trying to make money off of recovery. And,
that's how you felt at first.
Oh, that's how I felt at first. But let me disclaimer, like, that's not what it is.
Right.
And I wouldn't obviously work here if I felt that way. But I was just in denial.
Yeah.
I didn't want to surrender. And that's what they were requiring from me, is to surrender to the process that they outlined.
Right.
And I was going to put up every kind of wall and find every kind of excuse and make up things and produce things that weren't true so that I didn't have to deal with the shame and the guilt and the trauma that I had walled off for so long.
Absolutely. And today, life is pretty good.
Yeah. So, there's another turning point.
Oh yeah.
I'd love to touch on.
Keep the turns coming.
Okay. And so about 4.5 months in, I'm doing the program as it's outlined. And what I love about Hope is Alive is after you peel back the layer of, we're all here for substance abuse, we get down to what we call process addictions.
Yes.
And I had never heard that word. I had never, in the 12 treatment facilities, multiple counselors, no one had ever said anything about codependency, ever.
I'd never heard of it.
Because I'd self-diagnosed myself many times. I thought it was borderline personality disorder, schizophrenic. I mean, I thought I had found the solution and didn't need anybody else to diagnose me, and this is what's wrong with me. And, obviously I stayed in my addiction through that. But once, my program managers began to teach me on what codependency is and how workaholism, which Ari, you're fully, living out,
right,
is affecting your life and keeping you enslaved to this horrific cycle.
Yeah.
Once I started to receive these teachings and apply them to my life, that's where I can sit here confidently with you and say, I will never put a substance in my body to change the way I feel ever again.
Yeah.
Because I have worked through the things that I didn't know
That led you there.
that had led me there.
Yeah.
You know, I never knew. I didn't come to Hope is Alive to work on those things, but through coming to Hope is Alive, I was able to work on those things. And
Yeah.
I didn't know they were even there.
And a shout out to Allison Lang, our co-founder and COO, for writing such a in-depth and incredible program.
Right.
Like you said, man, you don't find it anywhere else.
Right.
I'd never heard of it anywhere else.
Right. There was a teaching. I'll share this quickly.
Yeah.
It was about feeling your feelings. Okay, makes sense. You know, sure, feel your feelings. Well, here I am alone on Thanksgiving. My family is in Norman, Oklahoma. Ari's not invited. I understand why. Misery martyr, woe is me. And I'm sitting in this office after going through this teaching about feeling each of those emotions. And I was sad and I was angry and I was crying and frustrated and confused.
Yeah.
And I realized in that moment that the 12-year-old Ari that had begun using is where my emotions stopped maturing. And so here I was at 35 with the emotions of a teenager.
Wow.
And I allowed it to be okay. I was safe, I was secure, and I was protected.
Yeah.
In the Hope is Alive mentoring homes.
Yeah.
Around a bunch of guys who were going through the same exact thing.
Yeah.
My bills were paid and nobody was requiring anything from me in that moment.
Right.
Except to feel that moment.
Yes. Feel
And that
your
was,
feelings.
Again, I love that turning point for me.
Yeah.
Turning point for sure.
Turning point.
I was sold out after that.
And that was it.
Well, there's
No, I'm just
been
messing with
other
you.
things. Yeah.
No, I don't, I've heard a lot of your story. I've never heard that part of your story. But I do remember there being a time when a light kind of switched for you.
Yeah.
To the point so much where one day I was up here at work trying to schedule a meeting with Lance, and I was looking at his calendar and I saw coffee with Ari. Well,
right.
I had an idea of what that meant. Generally coffee with this person means a potential position, and didn't flinch. I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
I love that. Yeah. That's the same month that I had this experience. So,
wow.
Life radically changed in November of 2020 for me.
Yeah.
Incredible. Absolutely.
Incredible. And today you're married.
God's mercy.
Yeah.
I thought I was unmarriable.
Right.
That's even a word. I thought I was too far gone.
Yeah.
Too much trauma. And God just blessed me with the most amazing woman.
Yeah.
She is a graduate of the Hope is Alive program. She's the longest standing staff member.
She is.
Currently.
Okay.
On staff.
Currently.
I just shout her out because, it's a big accomplishment.
Yeah. No,
And,
we love her very much.
She oversees, the entire women's programs and all the staff. And,
Yeah.
life is radically different for Ari today.
Radical life change in action.
Absolutely.
Bro, thank you so much for joining us today.
No, I love this.
This has been a blast. Thank you so much for, just coming on, being vulnerable, sharing, and being guest number 1 on season 2.
Let's go.
Of the Hope Dealers podcast. Thank you all for listening and watching. If this is your first time, be sure to like, subscribe, share this, let everybody know. And we will see you again next time. This is the Hope Dealers podcast.
A new place, a new home.